how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast, and we know exactly who your Red Raiders will be playing in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament. It will be the BYU Cougars. Another chance for the Red Raiders to get a quad one win. We'll break down that game in its entirety. We'll also have the latest updates when it comes to Texas Tech star center Warren Washington. Will he be playing in Kansas City? We'll talk about that here in just a little bit, but if y'all are familiar with the channel, you know how I get down here in terms of asking y'all interactive questions to get the chat going. First and foremost, let me know where you're watching from. And then maybe even more importantly than that, like the video and let me know your score prediction for this top 25 matchup up in Kansas City between your Texas Tech Red Raiders and the BYU Cougars, who actually won earlier today. They faced off against the UCF Knights. They actually got off to a pretty hot start, did BYU, making 4 of 5 from 3 in the first 4 minutes of that game, and it looked like it was going to be a blowout, but you got to give credit to the Knights and what they did. Coach Dawkins getting his guys back in a position to at least have a chance momentarily to win the basketball game, but in the end, BYU pulled away after they adjusted to UCF and their full court press. We'll talk about what we could see tomorrow morning as Texas Tech will face off against the Cougars at 11:30 a.m. Get your coffee ready, folks, in terms of Texas Tech playing early on in the morning. Quick couple of shout-outs here. Let's see where we're watching from. We've got, 559 Visba. He was in here early. Shout out to you for getting the comments section going. We've also got, a good one right there with the Davon. All right. I love it, man. We've got Elgin, Texas. We've got Fort Worth. Where's everybody else watching from? Let me know in the comments as we go along here on the show. I know some people are watching on Twitter. Some people are watching on YouTube. Wherever you are watching from and whatever platform you're watching on, I appreciate you spending some of your Wednesday night with me. All right. Let's get into this because this one's going to be an interesting game, and I know that some are interested in the Warren Washington front. We'll get there in just a second, but let's kind of lay the land here in terms of just looking at the scene setter for Texas Tech in this one. As I mentioned, this game will tip off at 11:30 a.m. Central Time up in Kansas City, a.k.a. the town that Patrick Mahomes built. Don't check the facts. It's the truth. All right, the Red Raiders, they'll face off against BYU, who had an 87-73 win over the UCF Knights earlier today. Now, the lone matchup that the Red Raiders had with BYU out in Lubbock was a high-scoring one. You might remember Pop Isaacs had a career night against the Cougars, 32 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He was absolutely sensational for the Red Raiders. Now, they did have Warren Washington in that game, and we will talk about him here in just a second. But when you look at the odds of this matchup for Texas Tech, it's a little interesting. It's a neutral site game. How does that impact things? It's a little weird, right? Well, I go to Bart Torvik in terms of his T ranks and everything like that. Y'all may be aware of those as well. BYU is favored in this one by 2.5 points, and I don't think that should be surprising to anybody. BYU is getting hot just like Texas Tech is at the right time, and they have, not as many health concerns do the Cougars. So I'm not surprised by that. His metrics also give Texas Tech a 41% chance to win the game. I'll give you my prediction later on here in just a little bit. Want to give a couple more shout outs here in the comments, as I know a lot of people are tuning in. We've got Oklahoma. We've got Odessa. We've got Oklahoma City. More specifically, we've got Amarillo. And then I'm not going to lie to you, old Texas Tech man. No idea how to pronounce that. I'll just say Oklahoma on that aspect of things right there. One reminder real quick before we get into Warren Washington and if he will play in this, Big 12 tournament for Texas Tech. Be sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button because we will be doing a live stream of the first game in the NCAA tournament for the Red Raiders in the Grant McCasland era. We will have a scoreboard up. I will have a special guest. We'll do play-by-play, be live interactive here in the chat in real time, getting to see what the Red Raiders do wherever they may go in the NCAA tournament. So if you want to join the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube, it's really simple. Do these 3 simple steps for me. Like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. All right. Warren Washington. That's why y'all are here. Let's be real about it. I get it. This is what I've heard. He has been practicing, and there is a chance that he plays in Kansas City. albeit I don't know what that chance is, and I don't want to put a number by it. But I will say this, the sense that I get from the people that have been around it or whatever you want to say in terms of people keeping me in the know when it comes to Warren Washington and his injury are this. I would not be surprised if when he comes back, if he does in fact come back, I probably should say it that way, that he's just in a 15 to 20 minute role, and 20 is probably on the high side. It would not shock me at all if Warren Washington came back and he was in fact coming off of the bench because of the play you've seen from Robert Jennings, most specifically in the starting lineup, and then Emelie-Ylahu, because now you kind of have that feeling of, okay, Warren doesn't have all the pressure in the sense of you've seen the flashes from Robert Jennings. You've seen the flashes from Emelie-Ylahu. You've seen them play solid ball. Now, have they played up to Warren Washington's standard and level of play? Obviously not. They're not the same player, but what percentage is Warren Washington going to be? I think that's a fair question. And is he 75%? Is he less than that? Is he closer to 80? What might it be? And I think that that's probably the realistic way to look at this for Texas Tech in the sense of a Warren Washington update right now is that I personally get the sense, and this is what I get from talking to people in terms of, I guess you'd call it a vibe. I guess is what we go off of here. It feels like he's going to play again this year. That being said, it wouldn't shock me if he doesn't for the sheer fact of Grant McCasland and crew are going to do what's best for Warren Washington long term. Now, does Warren want to play? Obviously, he's a high-level athlete. He's a competitor. He wants to be out there with his brothers playing in the most important part of the season for the Red Raiders. That being said, you have to be smart about this long term if you're Warren and the trainers and the coaching staff in the sense of a 7-footer with a foot injury, let alone any injury, isn't ideal. But specifically a lower body injury around the foot and ankle area, those are tough to manage. And you saw what happened against UCF in the sense of he came back too early. Let's call a spade, right? He should not have played in that UCF game. I think everybody knows that, hindsight 2020. But now you have the chance to potentially have it where he has a month off if he doesn't play in Kansas City. And now that still is technically on the table. Wouldn't be surprised either way it goes, probably leaning towards the fact of, hey, he's not going to play in Kansas City. That's the sense I get. But let's say he doesn't play in Kansas City. He would have 27 or 28 days off, depending on, well, when Texas Tech is scheduled to play their first NCAA tournament game, whether that's on Thursday of next week or if that is Friday of next week. It would be 27 to 28 days since the last time Warren Washington played in a Texas Tech men's basketball game. Is that enough time to get him right? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, and I assume most of you watching, over 130 of y'all right now, aren't doctors either, okay? But I will say this from this standpoint. It is good that he is practicing, albeit in a limited capacity, trying to get his legs out from under him, I should say, and really just making sure that, hey, he has the opportunity to potentially play in the most important part of the season for the Red Raiders. But that's the update I have. I'm not going to tell you he's going to play, because that's not fair to anybody, but it's headed in the right direction. But don't be surprised if he does not play in Kansas City. They get that rest under him, get a few practices under his belt out in the 806 before they travel to, well, wherever they're traveling, whether that's Pittsburgh or any other destination in the first round of the NCAA tournament for Texas Tech. All right, let's get to the comments real quick. In terms of, well, where people are from. We've got Houston in here as well at the bottom of the map, baby. There we go. Love that. Jake asked, why even play Washington? Keep him healthy for the NCAA tournament. I think that that's on the table. But it's also one of those things, Jake, and I'm glad you asked that from the sheer standpoint if I didn't bring this up. Do you want to just throw him out there without playing in a game for that long in the most important game of your season? Right? Like the most important game of your season, if you're Texas Tech, is either happening next Thursday or next Friday. That's just the reality of it, okay? So you have to think about that in the sense of, do you just kind of want to throw him into the Sharks, like that aspect of things, right? Or do you want to have him potentially go into Kansas City, play maybe 5 to 10 minutes there, and then be ready for some on-court action in terms of ramping it up in the NCAA tournament? It's a good question. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer outside of, hey, we know that they rushed him back down in Orlando. I think that was all parties involved. But now you have to think about it from your perspective, Jake. I think you bring up a great point. Why rush him back if it's not the most important game of the year? Well, there's the other point of, what about if he's rusty as hell and he becomes a liability and you wasted the opportunity to get him on the floor to maybe do better things for you in the sense of playing him in the Big 12 tournament, and then he's a little less rusty in the NCAA tournament? It's a double-edged sword a little bit, in my opinion. All right, Roger says, you play W because he's been cleared, and it's much better to start ramping his play now instead of dropping him straight to March Madness. There you go. I should have read the other comment. It happens to me sometimes. I went to school long enough to be one, RC. I'm guessing that is a doctor joke there, and if you ask my wife, she would probably say the same thing about me, John. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Again, we got John in here, Roger, we got Jake, we got Lawrence. We got plenty of people watching, over 165 people watching right now. Appreciate y'all tuning in, whether that's on Twitter or whether that's on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, be sure to like the video. It goes a long way. And listen, hey, again, I know I just mentioned it a few minutes ago. Got to mention it one more time. We will be doing a live stream here on the channel with a live scoreboard on the screen, live play-by-play and commentary, interacting with each and every one of you during the first game of, well, the NCAA tournament for the Grant McCasland era here on the channel. So like the video, hit that subscribe button, and, well, join the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube today. All right, again, going to leave it at the bottom of your screen for y'all to get interactive again. BYU Texas Tech tomorrow in Kansas City at the T-Mobile Center. By the way, where do y'all stand about some of these new Pac-12 schools getting a little upset that the, Big 12 tournament is in Kansas City? I've seen quite a few people saying that, oh, this is stupid, they should have it in Vegas. I'll be honest with you. I've never been to the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City, but everybody I've talked to that has gone absolutely loves it, and they don't want it moved. Now, selfishly, I'd love to have it in the Metroplex or somewhere closer to the 806, right? Selfishly. But I think Kansas City is a great spot for it. Let me know how y'all are thinking about that, in the sense of, would you rather see it in Vegas? I think from a degenerate gambling standpoint, I probably would, but I think Kansas City is a really, really good spot. And while you're in the comments, you might as well let me know your score prediction for tomorrow's game for the Red Raiders in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament between the number 25 Texas Tech Red Raiders and the number 20 BYU Cougars. Now, I want to talk about some things that I think Texas Tech has done really, really well, really the past 3.5 games, dating back to halftime against Texas, because, well, that first half against Texas was just an atrocity, and they should have paid you money for watching it, if I'm being honest. It was that bad of a half. Probably the worst first half of basketball I've seen Texas Tech play in maybe 3 or 4 years, and that's including the Mark Adams second year. Okay, it was that bad. That being said, they adjusted. It was just a little too late in that regard. The things that they are doing really, really well, and I think you got to give credit to guys like RJ and EY in the sense of Robert Jennings and Melialahu, and how they've stepped up in their roles in terms of they've been asked to do a lot without Warren Washington, and now you can see them getting a little more comfortable and playing a little more up to their potential, right? Ameli's a little bit different from Rob. Rob has done a phenomenal job at being more physical. I thought that was the biggest knock on him in terms of really throughout a majority of the season, was I just didn't think he was that physical. He's changed that the last 3 games. He has been a menace when it comes to going in, getting physical, doing the dirty work down there, down low. Now, does it always work in terms of him getting the rebound? No, but you can see the physicality intensify for him throughout these last 3 games, and that is huge for Texas Tech going in to, well, postseason play. Now, you think about Melialahu. He's a guy that I've been excited about since they signed him out of Finland, a guy that has played in Euro under 18 and been really a star in that regard. He comes into the 806. He wasn't really supposed to play that much this year, but you have the injury to Warren Washington, you have the injury to Devin Cambridge, and now it's caught up to him where he's on the floor. And now, has he looked like he's a finished product? Absolutely not. But there's a lot of potential there, and he's a guy I'm really excited about. He is a really good player in the pick and roll, and that's one thing that's really stood out to me over the last 3 games. And I get it, somebody's going to say, oh, well, 2 of those games were against the worst teams in the Big 12. They're not even playing basketball anymore, and one of them just fired their coach, and the other, they should. They just can't afford to, in Oklahoma State. I get it. I really do. Go watch that Baylor tape, though. Go watch what Melialahu and Robert Jennings did against Baylor, against Misi, one of the best bigs in not only the Big 12, but in the country. That's a first-round pick right there in Misi at Baylor, okay? They made him look pedestrian for very long stretches of time. Now, he had his runs where it was like, oh, yeah, there's the first-round pick. But overall, they played phenomenal against him. And not only just him, really every Baylor big. That was a main reason Texas Tech went out and looked really good. Obviously, making shots helps too. But that's a big reason why they got out to that lead, and a big reason in the end they did a really good job. More so Ameli coming in and Robert Jennings there for, well, really about the first 12, 14 minutes of the second half. And then they finished when Rob fouled out with the small ball lineup. And by the way, I love me the small ball lineup. That's Texas Tech's best lineup. And I don't even care if Warren Washington's healthy. That's their best lineup. And that lineup is going to really create nightmares for opposing teams, not only in the Big 12 tournament, but I think in the NCAA tournament, because listen, Texas Tech has improved their physicality, but now they're starting to shoot the ball better. And with that small ball lineup and a guy like Darion Williams, who is the tallest guy on the floor for you and playing that big type role, there's not very many teams in the country that have a guy that can guard him out on the perimeter that's a big. He just creates mismatches across the board. And by the way, this is my rant real quick. Darion Williams not being on the all Big 12 second team, it's lunacy. The voters suck. They suck. Let's just be real about it. That was absolutely dreadful that he's on the third team. I think Pop appropriately was on the third team, but to have a guy that had an historic season like Darion Williams only on the third team, absolute lunacy. Absolute lunacy. All right, let's see here. We've got some more comments. At this point, does one more week of rest help any? I think that's a great question too. In terms of Warren Washington, I would tend to say yes. I mean, enough rest specifically for a big, right? You've got a guy, you're talking about a foot injury, more specifically a toe. Like, those are hard to heal on big guys, right? So I think as much rest as possible helps. But it's a good question in terms of, I see where you're coming from in the sense of, well, he's already rested all this time. If it's not going to get much better, it's just a pain tolerance thing. I get it. I really do from that perspective. Jim Johnson, I say we keep Washington rested / healed. In my opinion, likely won't win Big 12, so save him for the dance. That's a great point. But I will say this, Jim, in the sense of I know others are thinking in the similar vein as you. If you beat BYU, I think you go up a seed line. Is that worth it? Right? In terms of, I think right now, if you ask me, Texas Tech is probably one of the two best 7 seeds. I think they jump up to a 6 line. And, well, if they beat BYU, that's where they're at. I don't know if it's worth it or not. I think it's a great question. It just kind of depends on, do you feel comfortable with the potential matchups as a 7? Or do you want to go the route of getting a 6 versus 11? I think it's all up to you. And most importantly, I think it's up to if Warren Washington is healthy enough to do so, which it sounds like he is in terms of at least some regards going out there and getting in some work on the court. From Roger, excuse me. Rogers is where I graduated high school. Vegas would be a terrible idea, DFW or Kansas City. I tend to agree. I mean, selfishly, DFW would be awesome. John, I want Memphis. Why? Why Memphis? I'd rather have Houston than Memphis, personally. In Tulsa, the BOK Center's legit. Tulsa's a cool arena. Remember, that's where Texas Tech actually started their Final Four run. When they played Northern Kentucky and then beat, well, now Alabama head coach when he was at Buffalo, Nate Oates. John Lewis says, kick-ass barbecue and nightlife. That's fair. Beale Street is pretty cool. I'll give you that. This from Roger. Ylahu is bigger, but Jennings is stronger and more athletic at this point in their respective careers. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what happens when you're in a weight room program for 1 year ahead of somebody, right? You think about it in that sense. But I'm excited about Ameli Ylahu. I think he has a really good future. And more specifically, I'm really excited about the possibilities of him playing alongside Darion Williams, because I think those two guys can create a ton of mismatches with their skill sets in the Big 12, regardless of if it's against a traditional 7-footer or if it's against a smaller big. I think they create a ton of mismatches, if you ask me. All right. This from Jake as well. You mean Utah Plains? Color me shocked. KC rocks. as a host for the Big 12 tournament, and the Utes can pound sand. Yeah, it's not just Utah, by the way. I've seen Arizona State fans, Colorado fans. It's been everybody, but I will admit it has mostly been Utah, but I'm not shocked by that, just like you aren't. I think Warren only needs to play 10 to 15 minutes right now. I agree. I think 20 minutes is max scenario, regardless of what happens in terms of his health right now. I just think for the betterment of his career too, I think you have to think about it from that perspective, right? In the sense of his career isn't over if they only play one game in the NCAA tournament. He's going to have an opportunity to play professional ball, whether that's here or overseas. And by the way, I got to talk to Matt Mooney over on the new website we launched, the Scarlet and Black Insider. So you can check that out. Just go to my Twitter and see that. Be sure to subscribe to that. Just $1 for the first month. It was a really cool experience getting to talk to him. The last time I talked to him was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the locker room. Y'all know what happened there. But yeah, I agree with you in that sense, John. You know, you gotta protect him in that sense, but also these young guys have done a good job in the sense of playing up to the occasion. Now, NCAA tournament's a little bit different. I get that. You get that. But it is what it is on that front. If you thought the Big 12 teams were bad, the AP selection, Pop on the second team, and no Darion we're even goofier. I'm not going to lie to you, Roger. I didn't look at it. When I saw the AP come out, I was like, yeah, I'm not paying attention to that. It's kind of like I'm cool paying attention to the AP top 25 because I think it's fun for fans in terms of, you know, it's fun for them to look at that number next to the name. In the grand scheme of things, it really means nothing. But I think it's fun in that regard. When it comes to their voting for National Player of the Year and stuff like that, they are the furthest outlet I go to in terms of actually looking who were the best players in any respective conference. Isaac says this game between BYU and Texas Tech is going to be a shootout. I 100% agree. Remember, 85-78 out in the 806. Pop Isaacs scored a career-high 32 points, also had 5 rebounds and 4 assists. In that game, he was phenomenal, and he's starting to pick up a little bit in terms of really the past 4 games where he's averaged 16.5 points and shooting 35% from 3. Darion Williams is averaging 16.7 points per game during that frame and shooting a mere 73% from 3. Bonker numbers. Just absolutely bonkers. Mariachi Tech fan. It really depends on who we play. If we play Nevada as a 7, it's absolutely worth it to move up. Yeah, I don't want to play a team like James Madison either. I think James Madison is all kinds of legit. If you ask me, there's a couple of mid-majors that, you know, you always got to be careful with mid-majors in March. I think everybody knows that. But there's a couple that scare me more than others, and James Madison is definitely one of those teams. They look legit. And in fact, I think James Madison's head coach actually leaves for West Virginia. Maybe a bold prediction. I don't know. I haven't seen their coaching board or anything like that in terms of some of their more in-depth insiders letting that information out, but it feels like a really good fit for them potentially. Hey, RC, what seniors are eligible to return next year? So the only 2 guys on the roster right now that have exhausted all of their eligibility are Warren Washington and Joe Toussaint. It would have been Devin Cambridge, but he has gotten a medical red shirt. He has eligibility for next year. The only 2 that cannot return for eligibility purposes are simply Joe Toussaint and Warren Washington. So there's that. RC, thoughts on a Texas Tech Virginia rematch? Yeah, I saw that. I believe it was Andy Katz over at the NCAA in terms of, well, you know, putting out a bracket in terms of his projections and everything. And it was Virginia playing in, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong there, against North Carolina State in Dayton. But it would be against Texas Tech as a 6 seed, whoever won that game. Yeah, man. I mean, it's cool. I don't know, man. Like, don't get me wrong. As a Tech fan, I despise West Virginia, or not West Virginia, but Virginia, excuse me. Don't really like West Virginia either, but more specifically Virginia. But it is what it is. They're boring as hell to watch. I don't think it'd be a fun game to watch. I think Texas Tech would be the favorites in that game for sure, but it's not a fun game to watch when Virginia is involved. They slow the pace down. They absolutely don't know how to dribble, let alone shoot. I mean, they don't know how to do anything on one side of the floor. It's it's hard to watch, man. It really is. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. It's what it is on that front. But let's see here. We got Isaac one more time. BYU and Texas Tech game tomorrow is going to be the best game in this tournament. I think there's potential for it. I mean, Kansas decided not to show up. And by the way, before anybody says anything about that, I think that's the right move for Kansas because the committee's already said basically it doesn't matter what happens in this tournament. And oh, by the way, the committee said this real quick. Let me pull it up real quick. Before I do, let me know what's your prediction. I got it right there down below. And reminder to be sure to hit that subscribe button for, the live stream that we're going to be doing during the first round matchup for your Texas Tech Road Raiders in the NCAA tournament. We'll have a scoreboard on the screen, live interactive play-by-play. The chat will be going on, so come hang out with the most interactive group of Texas Tech fans and the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube, and we'll have it streaming on Twitter too as well, so you can come hang out there as well. Let me look this up real quick in terms of what the committee said about, I believe it was Indiana State, in the sense of what injuries are going to impact them in the NCAA tournament in their seeding. Hold on, let me pull this up. All right, here it is. Got it. The committee basically today, in other words, they said the silent part out loud, which, as we all know, you're not supposed to do, but they did it anyway. And this is what they said. This is from Charles McClelland, the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee Chair. And this is from Jeff Berzello. He was just asked about Indiana State on a call with reporters. Remember, Indiana State did not get the automatic bid in the Missouri Valley Conference, although the Sycamores were easily the best team in that conference all year long. They lost to, I believe, Southern Illinois. Doesn't matter, though. After giving the generic answer that they'll garner conversation in the room, he specifically said the committee is aware that starter Jason Kent missed the loss to Southern Illinois and most of the loss to Illinois State. Found that interesting. Why does that matter? I think there's a multitude of reasons why that matters. First and foremost, now we're taking into account injuries. Well, this is the slippery slope now. Like, I can understand it in some regards, but if you do that for Indiana State, why aren't you doing it for Texas Tech? Right? Warren Washington missed some games, and now, listen, how much does that impact things? I'm not sure, but also, are they doing this for Kansas in terms of people not asking them as many questions? Because let's face it, Kansas has a really good non-con schedule, but they haven't been Kansas in the Big 12, right? And a lot of people are asking, why are they on the 3 line? Some people even have them on the 2. Is this a way to cover that up? I think it's just a slippery slope in terms of what the committee is doing there, potentially. And it's something that you have to wonder, if that happens for Illinois State, why isn't it happening for Texas Tech? Why isn't it going to happen for Kansas? Why isn't it going to happen for any other school you name that's in the running to make the NCAA tournament? It's a slippery slope, and one that I'm not surprised that the NCAA said out loud, because as we know, the NCAA has a tendency to smear, well, you know what, all over its face and just look awful. But that's interesting because it would impact Texas Tech in the sense of, in theory, right? In theory, that would impact Texas Tech, even if they're already in, right? Like, they're a lock, but it would impact the Red Raiders in some regards, in my opinion. Let's see here. This is from Old Texas Tech, man. Your mark is looking at Louisville, South Carolina, Pitt, Virginia, and others to join the Big 12. Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. There's so much stuff going on when it comes to conference realignment. I know that multiple people have been in my mentions talking about it in the sense of, did you see that Jeff Swaim and what he said about it? Like, yeah, I saw it. I'm not going to report on it, though. I don't think it's, one of those deals where it's worth talking about right now, because it's just not. There's other things to talk about from a Texas Tech perspective. This from Roger. Virginia getting an at-large bid would be an atrocity according to many metrics that I follow, but the selection committee has a history of doing this kind of nonsense. Yep. And they have a history apparently now of letting in teams that, again, I want to see Indiana State in there. I want to see Baby Jokic play. For those that don't know who Baby Jokic is, highly recommend go watching some Indiana State highlights. But it's one of those deals where I get it. They're a mid-major. And good call, Roger. It was Drake that beat them, not Illinois State. They're one of their best players didn't play against Illinois State. I read that wrong. Thank you for correcting me there in the comments, Roger, in terms of who beat Illinois State in the Missouri Valley Conference. So it's just such a slippery slope, right? Because if that's the case, right, let's just look at this from a clear Texas Tech perspective, okay? And we're gonna be leaping here a little bit. If you take out the games Warren Washington didn't play in, right? Well, in theory, wouldn't that make Texas Tech's resume look a lot better? Right? Now you're talking about, well, Texas Tech has a lot of good wins. They don't have really any bad losses. It's just kind of in the middle there in terms of a lot of their non-con stuff from the perspective of evening out with their Big 12 things. If that's the case, Texas Tech should be close to a 5 seed, if not a 4. I mean, they finished 3rd in the Big 12 conference. Now, that's not going to happen unless they win the Big 12 tournament. But it's such a slippery slope, and this is the crap that I hate about the NCAA, where they're never consistent with anything. Every year, it's different. Just go and look and have a model that you use each and every year for a consistency perspective, and stop leaving it up to a guessing game and the human element. I understand this is a human game when it comes down to it, but putting the best teams in the field of, well, I guess technically 64 after you play in Dayton, what are we doing here? Like, stop it. All right, let's talk again. Some of y'all may have missed the Warren Washington update in terms of what I've been told. He has been practicing a little bit to the level of, full practice, just running around, making sure his cardio is good, his feet are under him. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I've just been told, yes, he's been practicing. How much can he realistically play? I think 20 minutes is probably the top scenario, and I think personally that's pushing it. I think you're probably going to see him more in that 15-minute range. That being said, the reason being I think you can do that is because of how well Robert Jennings, Amelia Lahu have been playing for you as of recent, because now Warren Washington doesn't have to come and feel like he's a savior to that front court for Texas Tech. Now, he's a valuable piece. There's no doubt about it. But with the way Robert Jennings and Amelia Lahu have been playing, you feel better about easing Warren Washington in there from injury. So that's a huge positive. I would not be surprised also if Warren Washington comes off the bench in and if he returns, like when and if, if he doesn't play in Kansas City too, I talked about this in terms of how long would he be off? It would either be 27 days if Texas Tech played next Thursday in the NCAA tournament, or 28 days if they played on the Friday of the first round of the NCAA tournament. So that's kind of the update we've got going on right now. In terms of odds for Texas Tech, this is where things get interesting, because this is a neutral site game for this BYU matchup. Top 25. Again, let me know your score prediction in the comments as I get a drink real quick. T-Rank has BYU favored in this matchup by 2.5 points. No surprise there. BYU, much like Texas Tech, is playing some of its best ball of the season right now. Again, neutral site game. Interesting that it's 2.5, but does make sense. That probably means if it was in Provo, it'd be a 5-point game in terms of the spread towards BYU. And right now, it'd probably be a pick'em out in Lubbock. So no surprise there. His metrics give Texas Tech a 41% chance to beat the Cougars tomorrow morning, with tip-off scheduled for 11:30 a.m. Central Time. I do not believe that they have announced what channel it will be on. It's either going to be ESPN2 or ESPN Plus. Awesome. If it's ESPN Plus, right? Said no one ever. But yeah, that is the matchup. It is scheduled for 11:30 a.m. Central Time. And definitely one that I will be watching in the sense of a couple of things here. BYU, as we get a little bit more in depth into, this preview. And if you haven't already, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And if you're watching on Twitter, If you're not following me yet, what the hell are you doing? Do it. I know you're watching. I got the numbers. Hit that follow button if you haven't already. For more daily Texas Tech videos over on YouTube and a bunch of other stuff in terms of me rambling and getting excited about my Tennessee Titans and obviously a lot of Texas Tech ball talk as well, whether that's football or men's basketball. That being said, one of the things I'm watching for most in this matchup is the BYU shooting. And the reason being is this: they have been hot as hell recently, have the Cougars in terms of shooting the basketball. I mentioned it earlier. They were 4 of 5 from 3 to start their game against the Knights of UCF in their first game out in the Big 12 tournament. And really, they allowed UCF to get back in the game. But what was it in the very end that allowed them to really distance themselves from UCF and the fighting Coach Dawkins? Shooting. That's really what it is. So I'm interested to see. And the aspect of really their bigs intrigues me from the standpoint of Khalifa. Know the name. He is a guy that, again, talking about a Jokic type center, nowhere near it in terms of skill, but a similar skill set, right? He's a really good passer. And I'm interested to see what Texas Tech does in terms of limiting him, in terms of trying to get in the ball at the top of the key and being that facilitator for back cuts and also off-ball screens for BYU to get more open looks, specifically in the corners where he can just go over the top of the defense and drop a dime there. That's going to be interesting. But from the standpoint of Texas Tech, the matchup that I'm watching in this one is going to be the guard play. I mentioned it. I talked to Matt Mooney over on Scarlet and Black Insider. You can go subscribe there now for $1 for the first month. We're going to be having a ton of content over there on the site, including transfer portal stuff, exclusive interviews, everything in between. We've got you covered over there. But hey, nothing's changing here on YouTube. Still daily videos. The thing that's interesting for me for Texas Tech, and I talked about it with Matt Mooney over there, a little peek behind the curtain, is guard play. I want to see what Texas Tech gets out of their guards, because you've seen Pop Isaacs play a little bit better the past really 3.5 games. We know what Darion Williams presents, whatever you want to put him as a guard, a forward, whatever it may be. It doesn't really matter to me. You know Kerwin Walton, he's going to shoot the lights out of it. He's starting to get a little bit more momentum. The two guys I'm watching specifically in this BYU matchup are Chance McMillan and Joe Toussaint. More so Joe Toussaint. And the reason being is this: he's a physical guard. He can get downhill, and I think that's going to create issues when BYU has Khalifa in the game, especially when Texas Tech has a Melialahu in the game or they decide to go small. Because you get a guy that really isn't that fleet of foot, in my opinion, what I've seen from Khalifa. Good player, just not the most agile footwork in terms of trying to catch up defensively. You get him out towards the three-point line, that creates a lot of downhill opportunities for Joe Toussaint to get to the rim with easy buckets or to finish through contact, or maybe even better, set his teammates up in the corner threes where Darion Williams is shooting plus 50%, Kerwin Walton shooting plus 50%, and Chance McMillan is starting to heat up from that spot as well. So you've got opportunities like that. That's what I'm watching most. The guy that I am watching for Texas Tech most in this game is Joe Toussaint, not Pop Isaacs, not Darion Williams, nobody else. I'm watching Joe Toussaint because this is the time when veteran guards show out. This is when guard play is at its utmost importance. Any time of the year, this is it. You have to have really good guard play in the NCAA tournament. It's truly the difference maker. That's not saying that having a big isn't important. It is. But go look at the teams that do really well in March. What are you going to see most? Veteran guard play, stability in the backcourt. Texas Tech has that, okay? Now, you got to have the shots fall. There's no doubt about that, as Texas Tech is really big in terms of relying on that three-point shot. But a guy like Joe Toussaint, a guy that's been there, done that in terms of the NCAA tournament, is huge for Texas Tech in terms of getting them going in the right direction, not in the NCAA tournament, but just postseason play in general. And I think he has the opportunity to do that against BYU tomorrow morning out in Kansas City. All right, let's get some comments in here real quick. Jim says, gotta bounce, but let's go Ludwig and the players. There you go, Ludwig. I just watched him in full swing. That was really cool to see Ludwig, former Red Raider, playing out there in the Ryder Cup for the Europe team. That was really cool to see him in there. Roger says Texas Tech hasn't lost to a bad team. And by that, I mean outside the top 100 since Tubby's second year. This year, it's one of those deals where is the committee going to punish Texas Tech for not playing in the non-con in terms of having, I think it's around the 300th strength of schedule in non-con. I don't think they should, but the committee's done stupider things in the past. Let's see. Do they not need to test Warren now to see the viability in the NCAA tournament? Too risky to go cold in the NCAA? Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. I think it's definitely a concern. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion. But I also think from the standpoint of you could also do it in the sense of he could go through a scrimmage because they're going to have a scrimmage before the NCAA tournament. Will Texas Tech. So have him play in that. Is that good enough? I don't know. That's the thing. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it's more of what is best for him. And the only people that can make that decision, in my opinion, are Warren Washington, the coaches, and obviously the trainers for Texas Tech. Obviously a little early, but how do you think we will do in the portal this year for next season? I think they're going to be good. We actually talked about that over on the site earlier today and actually mentioned a name that I think Texas Tech has a pretty good chance at potentially landing in the portal. So that's over on Scarlet and Black Insider. But you're going to, just like every team in the country, right? Like from this standpoint, you're going to have guys into the portal. You're going to have some in there where you're like, whoa, that's a little bit surprising. And then you're going to have others. Prime example, I think everybody, I'm not breaking any news here, but I think everybody listening right now would be shocked if Kyron Lindsey doesn't enter the portal. Like, that's not going to surprise anybody, right? Like that, there's going to be those kinds. But I do think that Texas Tech has a good grasp on it. And I think that they're going to go portal heavy this time around. And then you're really going to see the buff effect in recruiting where they're going to go after some high talented guys in the class of 2025. You're already seeing a little bit with Kingston Fleming's Toombs, guys like that. You're going to see the buff effect in terms of his impact at the grassroots level of high school recruiting for Texas Tech. And that's why I've said for a long time, really since he got hired, that Buff was the best hire that Grant McCaslin had on that entire staff. And that's not a knock on Dave Smart, Luke Barnwell, Matt Chokey, anybody else. It's not a knock on them, but the impact that Buff has at the grassroots level for Texas Tech on the recruiting trail is it's unmatched. I mean, he is truly a difference maker in that regard. Isaac says Warren is going to have to be in a different role for the tournament, so figure it out in tomorrow's game. I think that that's a possibility. Do I think it actually happens? I'm not sure. You're going to know pretty quick, though. You get on Twitter, and I'll keep you updated there tomorrow before the game. It's going to be an early start again, 11:30 a.m. tip-off there in Kansas City for your Red Raiders. Their number 25 Red Raiders against the number 20 BYU Cougars in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament. I think it's this, man. Like it really comes down to a preference, in the sense of, do you think or do you want to throw Warren into really the Sharks, right, in terms of the NCAA tournament, or do you want to try and knock off the rust in a Big 12 game, but risk the re-injury factor? There's that as well. You have to think about that. Like, just because you throw him in there tomorrow and try and knock off the rust does not mean he's going to be fully healthy after that, right? There's a chance that he re-injures that. Would you rather have the possibility of him playing the full game in the NCAA tournament or trying to knock off the rust in the Big 12? I see both sides of the argument. I really, really do. Could fatigue factor in for BYU with 22 hours between games or a non-factor? Hell yeah. With how much those guys run in terms of running off screens and everything. Now, obviously, they're really well conditioned, this far into the year. But when you run that much, absolutely, it is going to play a major factor in terms of it may be one of those things where you see some short shots by them, whatever it may be. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think it could be a big factor for BYU. That being said, they're still going to ball out. BYU is a really, really good team and a team that I think a lot of people, if the bracket ends right, could have them going pretty deep into the tournament. Real quick, before I get to the comments section one more time, like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell if you want to come join us here on the Back to 12 podcast, where we will be doing a live stream of the first Texas Tech men's basketball NCAA tournament game of the Grant McCaslin era, either next Thursday or Friday. We'll have a scoreboard up. We'll be doing live play-by-play. We'll keep you updated with a scrolling scoreboard at the bottom of every other NCAA tournament game going on. So if you want to join the most engaging Texas Tech community and the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube, it's really simple. Do these 3 simple steps. Like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And if you're listening on Twitter, and I know a lot of you are, I'm looking at the numbers right now. Appreciate over 300 of y'all tuning in on Twitter. Hit that follow button. If you ain't following me yet, you should do it now. It's March Madness, and portal time is right around the corner. So stay in the know on Texas Tech men's basketball by simply following me on Twitter. So let me see if anybody shouted out some things on Twitter. Should go look at that right now in terms of did anybody send me some messages or anything like that, comments, whatever it may be. And if you haven't over there already, by the way, give it a retweet. Let's get as many people in here as possible. Okay. Let's read some comments here. This from Kyle. Who is going to guard Waterman? Big mismatch. Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the bigs for Texas Tech in the sense of Robert Jennings and Melialahu. Obviously, you could see potentially Warren Washington back. Nothing confirmed on that end. But Waterman is a really interesting player from the standpoint of I don't want to say he's a traditional big because he's not. I don't even know if they really have a traditional big in a sense. But he is a mismatcher, right, in the sense of what he possesses due to his height in his game, specifically on the perimeter. I think if you ask me, the best way to go about that is probably Kerwin. I would probably throw Kerwin at him just because of the length he presents, and that allows you to have Darion there to help, a guy like RJ or Ameli Allahu, who will probably have to guard Khalifa in the other big they have there. That's probably where you're going to go in that regard. Outside of that, you're going to ask your guards to get in their steps for the day. That's for sure, because BYU loves to run around, whether that's the Big 12 Sixth Man of the Year in Robinson or others in terms of TK. I mean, they've got a ton of guys that run around and really know how to get open in terms of just creating really good shot opportunities. And Khalifa does a good job there. But on the Waterman front, I think what Texas Tech is going to throw at him is probably Kerwin Walton, as well as the Darion Williams. I was about to say Demarion, but definitely Darion. All right. Do we have a chance at getting the Indiana State favorite? I don't know, man. I don't know. Is he going to enter the portal? I mean, maybe. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't. I mean, he's gonna be wanted by damn near every Power 5 team. I guess it's really not the Power 5 anymore with the Pac-12 here. Power 6. I guess it technically is the Power 5 now because I spoke in football terms. Power 5 team will want him. So I don't know, man. He's super fun to watch. I just hope Texas Tech doesn't have to play him in the NCAA tournament. If you got any more questions, be sure to drop them in the chat. Had that Warren Washington stuff up there in terms of his injury update down below at the bottom of the screen. Got another one down there now in terms of where you can follow me on Twitter if you're not watching there, or you can go check out the Scarlet and Black Insider for the latest Texas Tech news, whether that's in the portal. We'll have game threads over there and exclusive video content. Nothing will be changing here on the Back to 12 podcast. Still daily videos there, but if you want to join the Scarlet and Black Insiders, the first month is $1, and it's going to be during prime time, right? No better time to join now, and I'll have that link down in the description as well as the comments below after this is done. First month for $1, and it's about to be portal season and March Madness. There's no better deal in the Texas Tech content space than that right now. All right. One more time, BYU is favored in this matchup by 2.5 points. According to T-Rank in his metrics, he gives the Red Raiders a 41% chance to win this game. The last time that the Red Raiders matched up against BYU, you may remember, Pop Isaac's 32 points against the Cougars, as well as 5 rebounds and 4 assists. He had a career night, and Texas Tech won 85-78. So that's big. Warren Washington one more time has been practicing. Will he play against the Cougars? That is the big question that Texas Tech fans are asking, and I'm not even going to try and give you false information. There's no point in doing that. I think it's a true TBD type thing right now, if you ask me. And I could see it going either way, where it's, he plays this game to knock some of the rust off, like some of y'all are mentioning in the comments, or hey, he just goes straight into it in terms of the NCAA tournament and has a chance to play there in the first round matchup for the Red Raiders. All right. I don't know if y'all have any more comments. I'll keep talking. Trust me, I will. My wife hates it, but I'll keep talking. No, she loves it. She does love it. Again, let me know where y'all are watching from in the comments. If y'all are on YouTube, let me know on Twitter as well. Comment down below on the video. Almost 500 people watching right now. We appreciate y'all. Those are some numbers right there. We love to see it. And again, if you haven't already, I'll even link it here on Twitter real quick in terms of, hey, y'all need to come subscribe here if y'all want to come hang out and be a part of, well, the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube. And no, that's not like a lie or anything. Go look at the numbers. The only bigger Texas Tech fan account here on YouTube, well, there isn't one. The only other bigger one is owned by the university. So there you go. Hey, man, just hit that subscribe button on YouTube. I promise you won't regret it. We give great content out here. We got Lyle. We'll have some special guests on. There's a lot to look forward to in terms of the content here on the channel. It's going to be really fun. I'm really excited about what we've got coming forward down the pipeline in terms of over on Scarlet and Black Insider. There's also a ton of other content that I'll be producing in terms of exclusive video content, more lives here on the channel, including that game that I told you about over for the first round of the NCAA tournament. And yeah, let me get this tweet out real quick. Sorry. All right, we're good to go. Sorry about that. Here we go. Watching on Twitter, this from Chris, by the way, sorry. The over seems like a lock, right? I have not seen the over. 153. Jeez, man. Well, if you want to go by numbers, right? 85-78, that was out in the 806. I will say typically in neutral site games, the scoring is a little less. So it feels about right. Now, I'm going to take a drink to think for a second longer. Yeah, it feels good. I'd probably take the over in that regard. That means it's going to clear the under by 20 points, though, Chris. It's usually how it goes with me in overs and unders in that regard. But that's interesting. 153.5. Okay. So you take the 2.5 out of that. It's 151, which 2.5 is the line right now. What are you looking at? About 78, 75 right there. Yeah, that seems about right. And I haven't given my score prediction yet. Nobody's asked. Oh, there we go. We got a score prediction. Let me know your score prediction in the comments, whether you're watching on Twitter, whether you're watching on YouTube, your score prediction for Texas Tech and BYU out in Kansas City in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament. I'll give you mine right now. I think Texas Tech actually wins this game. And I think they found something over the last 3 games that really has started to click. First and foremost, it just helps that they're shooting better. I think tired legs will have a play for BYU in this. But overall, I think Texas Tech is playing its best basketball of the season at the right time. Okay? And that's really what I'm looking at. And that's an interesting stat right there. Hub City Hoop Stock right there. Over are 2-0 on the day in the Big 12 tournament. That is interesting because typically the unders hit. That's typically how it goes in those neutral site tournament in terms of conference tournament games. It's interesting. But I'm going to go 83-80 Texas Tech. I think it is a barn burner. I think both teams shoot really, really well. I think this is one of those games that goes down to the final media timeout in the last 4 minutes. Brett says BYU 78, Texas Tech 71. Could see that as well. I think these are two of the teams, and I truly mean this. I think these are two teams that absolutely no opposing coach wants to play in March Madness because they can get on an absolute heater from deep. They move the ball well. They get out in space well. When they defend at a high level, it is at a high level. Do they do it consistently? Not all the time. Not all the time. But when they do, They do it at a high level. Just look at BYU and what they've done recently. Texas Tech, what they did against the best offense in the Big 12 in the Baylor Bears. They held them to 68 points. Like, Texas Tech's offense was great in that game. Don't get me wrong. But the thing that stood out in that Baylor game for Texas Tech was the defense. And Grant McCasland talked about it in his post-game presser where they were absolutely elite and locked in when it came to defense in the first half against Baylor. Now, it slipped up in the second half there, and a lot of it had to do with fouls, whether that was RJ, Pop, Darion, whoever it may be. All three of those guys had 4 fouls. But those are some things that I think teams just don't want to deal with. A team that can get hot as hell from deep, that has multiple shooters, and when they play defense in a multitude of different defenses, right? Texas Tech has proven they can kind of play different defenses at a high level. They just haven't done it consistently. Those are the types of team nobody wants to play. Like, I'm just telling you right now, that's just how it is in that regard. Again, if you haven't already, be sure to like the video. If you're watching on YouTube, let me go see how many people are watching on Twitter right now. I want to give you all an accurate number on this. This is nuts. Twitter's going crazy right now. I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's nuts. We've got over 560 people watching on Twitter. Appreciate y'all. That is awesome right there. Another score prediction. We've got Cimarron, 1876. Defense intensity shown on the perimeter in the last 2 games will affect BYU shooting. 86-75, Texas Tech. Got 570 on the app. You love to hear that. Appreciate everybody tuning in on YouTube as well. Can't wait for tomorrow. Yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup. That from Mel. Yeah, again, I'm watching Joe the most. I want to hear from you guys too in this. What player are you watching the most tomorrow for Texas Tech? Because for me, I think it's Joe Toussaint because of we've seen what Pop has done. He's starting to heat up. I think BYU will still have a heavy presence on him. But I think Joe Toussaint is the guy I'm watching for most for Texas Tech for the sheer fact of I think Texas Tech is going to really do a good job of spacing, and that is going to allow Joe Toussaint to have a multitude of opportunities to get downhill off the pick and roll and have the bigs for BYU backpedaling, and that creates opportunities for easy buckets at the rim, trying to finish through contact, or maybe even better, wide open threes since guys will collapse on the corners, and you've got guys like Darion Williams, Kerwin Walton. You've also got Pop, other guys on the perimeter that can knock down threes as well. So that's a big thing I'm watching for in this one for Texas Tech is the guard play because, as I mentioned, I interviewed Matt Mooney earlier this week for the Scarlet and Black Insider, and if you haven't subscribed to that, it's $1. It's prime time of the year, baby. There's no better deal in the Texas Tech media space than that right now. He talked about guard play. We had a conversation about it back and forth. Matt Mooney, he said, guard play is the most important thing in March Madness. You've got a veteran backcourt, and not just one guy. You've got multiple guys that have played in the NCAA tournament in March. Now, Pop Isaacs obviously hasn't, but I think people forget. Go look at what Chance McMillan did against Gonzaga in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year. A team that, well, a lot of people picked to win the national title. Your feelings are about Gonzaga, doesn't really matter. Chance McMillan balled the hell out for Grand Canyon against them. Over 15 points. He was arguably the best guard in that game for either team. He was that good last year. You've got Joe Toussaint, a veteran presence. Darion Williams got experience as well. So you have guys that have high-level experience in postseason basketball. And now you're talking about a team in BYU, obviously experienced, older team, are the Cougars. No pun intended there. But overall, you think about what Texas Tech does well and what they've done well really the past 3.5 games, and they have an opportunity to capitalize. Now, on the defensive end, they're going to have to stay connected to those BYU shooters. I mean, they have got some guys that are absolute snipers from the outside. But the guy you should know about most in terms of who kind of makes it all go for them, I think a lot of people are probably looking at their guards. I'm not. I'm looking at Khalifa, their center. He may look a little weird with the sweatband on and everything, but the dude's a hooper. He can absolutely ball out. Their offense runs through him. I think it was John Rothstein who said he has 22 assists over his last 3 games and just a couple of turnovers. I mean, he's been sensational for them. he really has done a great job for them in terms of orchestrating that offense. And he's a guy that when you look at what BYU does, he's a big reason why if they're successful. And if he plays bad, he's a big reason why they don't play well. I mean, it's really that simple. This from Kyle. Any updates on the status of Warren Washington? Yeah, one more time before we head out of here. I don't want to wrap this up because we've got almost 650 people watching right now. Ridiculous. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And if you're watching on Twitter, and I know a lot of y'all are, go to the link below in terms of this tweet, the thread that I created, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube for daily Texas Tech updates. Again, there's 658 of y'all in here. I know all of y'all aren't subscribed over on YouTube. Do so today for daily Texas Tech videos and the live stream we will have of the first round game in the NCAA tournament in year number 1 of Grant McCasland for your Red Raiders. Now, Kyle, I will answer your question now. Talked about it a little bit earlier. He has been practicing. To what degree? I'm not even going to try and lie to you. I do not know. That's all I've been told is he has been practicing. Okay. How much can he realistically play? That's another aspect of it. I would say probably anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes, 15 being on the high end. I think more realistically, you're in that 10 to 15 neighborhood. That's probably what you're dealing with. Okay. I will say this. I do think if Warren plays, I don't think he starts. That's just kind of the feeling I get. And the reason being is this. I don't think you thrust him into there. You pick and choose the opportunities you want to use him to go in there and make sure that there's not a high level of stress or whatever it may be, and he can get his feet under him in in-game situations. Because again, if he doesn't play in the Big 12 tournament, he will have nearly a month off. Nearly a month. It'll be either 27 days if Texas Tech is scheduled to play in the first round of the NCAA tournament on Thursday, or 28 days if they play on Friday. That's a long time. And now, obviously, he's been practicing a little bit, but to what degree, we don't know. I will say, I do think there is a chance that you see him play tomorrow. What percentage chance? I'm not going to put one out there, but it is encouraging that he's headed in the right direction, but you got to be safe and careful with these. I think anybody watching this right now would, I mean, obviously hindsight 2020, that him playing against UCF was a bad decision. It was. And so, now you got him back in terms of trying to get him back in the sense of getting back into game action. What does that look like long-term? I don't know. I think it's one of those deals where I wouldn't be shocked if he plays against BYU, but I also wouldn't be shocked if you hear Grant McCasland say, hey, we're going to rest him until the NCAA tournament and put him through a scrimmage, going into the week. Because they will scrimmage next week, will Texas Tech, whether that's on Monday or Tuesday, getaway day, whatever it is, in terms of wherever they go for the NCAA tournament. So he'll have opportunities to play in a game-like scenario, but just maybe not in front of a crowd, if that makes sense. Kyle also says, I completely agree. Just wanted to see him get back in the rotation before the NCAA tournament. Yeah, I don't know if that happens, but I do think that there is a solid chance that he does play in the Big 12 tournament. For how long? I don't know. I think you got to, see how he reacts, see how that foot feels and everything like that, because that's really what it comes down to is the risk factor, right? Like you have to think about it in this situation, I think, or this context. If you're Grant McCasland and crew, do you want to risk the chance, as I get some of my notes up here, sorry, the chance of him playing in a game in the Big 12 tournament that's, I don't know. I don't want to say it's meaningless because it's not, but a lot more meaningless than the NCAA tournament, and him going out there and re-aggravating it against BYU and him just not even having a chance to play in the NCAA tournament? Or do you want him to look a little bit rusty, maybe for the first 2 or 3 minutes in the NCAA tournament and have him play in that game maybe a little bit longer in a game that's of a lot more importance? I mean, just clearly more important. I think that that's kind of a preference thing, right, when it comes down to it, if you ask me. But yeah, I mean, it's super interesting from that regard, because I think that there are a lot of people that are obviously invested in Warren Washington. And, hindsight 2020, he shouldn't have played against UCF. He just shouldn't have. But you live and you learn in that regard. But you have to be cautious, I think, and they have been, Again, the numbers to know if he does not play in the Big 12 tournament are he would be off for 27 days or 28 days, depending on when Texas Tech plays in the NCAA tournament, whether that's on Thursday or Friday. But you have to be encouraged that Robert Jennings, Emeli Elahu, those kind of guys have been playing better. They're obviously not going to play to the level of Warren Washington in terms of if he was healthy, but you have to feel good about where he's at, or they're at, in the sense of giving you valuable minutes and not making it to where they're almost a liability anymore, like they were early on. And that's okay. In the sense of it was early on, they were thrust into a role that they were probably not prepared for, specifically Robert, in the sense of he was working his way back from a hamstring injury that he had this offseason. And then you have a guy like Emeli, who's a true freshman and probably wasn't supposed to play that many minutes overall. Okay, we've got MK all day in here saying BYU going to destroy tomorrow. It's possible. I'm sure you probably thought the same thing when they played out in Lubbock. I know a lot of BYU fans in the mentions did. But yeah, I appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll keep going if y'all keep the chat going and everything like that. I know a couple of people on Twitter have been tuning in. Got 677 people on Twitter, over 700 in total in here right now. You'll love to see it. You'll love to see it. Appreciate y'all tuning in, and we're not done yet. Hey, man, I think it's one of those deals, and just speaking out loud here and thinking about other things that interest me from a Texas Tech perspective and what this means. We talked about it in the sense of where the Red Raiders would go seed-wise, right? For those that may have missed it earlier. I think if they beat BYU, they flip. And so BYU has been on the 5-6 line, whatever it is, really like that last 5, first 6 on a lot of bracketology projections. I think they flip if Texas Tech wins. So I think BYU falls a little bit, the Red Raiders jump up, right? And this is a quad 1 win for both of these teams, even on a neutral site. Both of these teams, they want this because the seeding will have, it'll have drastic impacts on the seeding, that's for sure, in a lot of regards for both teams. Now, I've also had people ask me, RC, how is BYU, ahead of Texas Tech in all of this? They beat them in the regular season, even if it was out in Lubbock. How is this possible, right? Well, just go look at BYU. And fun fact, I'll go ahead and look at it too for you guys in the sense of what BYU has done, because it's pretty impressive, actually, in the sense of what they've done this year, specifically in year number 1 of the Big 12. So a couple of wins that go a long way for them. Let's just get it out of the way. Iowa State, that's a hell of a win, people. That's a hell of a win, regardless of if it's out in Provo or not. That's a really good win. They beat Texas, okay? They beat UCF, a team Texas Tech couldn't beat. They beat Baylor. They beat Kansas at Kansas. They only lost by 5 at Iowa State. They've also got a couple of non-con wins against teams like North Carolina State, and they also beat San Diego State. They are much better in terms of their non-con resume than Texas Tech. You don't know that going in. You just play whoever you play in terms of that, and the season and cards fall where they may. But that's why BYU is higher. Same thing with Kansas. I know some people have been asking that in terms of how was Kansas ranked higher in the seeding and the projections, in the sense of, well, they finished behind Texas Tech in the Big 12 standings. They can't be that great. I mean, half of their team missed in terms of, Kevin McCullough missed a ton of Big 12 play. Well, I mean, they have a really good non-con schedule, and it's Kansas. There's going to be some bias there. We can say that as well. Just how much, I don't know. But if you've been around in terms of the live stream for the past, I don't know, about 30 minutes, going on an hour right now, we've got 730 people tuned in. The committee is going to show bias towards that. And they had a quote earlier today that for Indiana State, they're going to take into account injuries. Well, they're going to do that for Kansas. They're going to do it for KU too. And if that's the case, you got to take into injuries for everybody. But it's a slippery slope in that regard. Will they actually do it? TBD. I guess we'll have to find out at 5 o'clock on Sunday when they release the bracket. But seeding-wise for Texas Tech, if you ask me right now, and I'm not a bracketology guy in the sense of I'm going out there and looking at all the metrics and everything, just the eyeball test, for me, Texas Tech is the highest 7 seed or the lowest 6 seed right now. That's kind of where I'm at, okay? And I think if they win this game against BYU, it could jump them up to the highest 6 seed or the lowest 5 seed. I think that that's where Texas Tech is at right now, because you got to look at this from the perspective of the totality of what Texas Tech has done this year and some of their wins. I mean, they have impressive wins. Now, obviously you didn't get to play up in Kansas. You lost at Houston, right? You lost at Iowa State, and that score really doesn't really dictate or signify how much of a blowout that game was, if we're being honest, up in Ames. But I think that's where Texas Tech is at right now. I think that that's truly where the Red Raiders are at. And this is a big one for Texas Tech in the sense of, I understand that this game can't hurt them. And the committee has proven that year after year. That's one thing I can give them their credit to, in the sense of they have been consistent in the sense that, hey, these games can't hurt you in conference tournaments. That's one thing for sure. But they can help you. And if you get another quad one win, regardless of if it's on a neutral court, and that would be that for either team who won, BYU or Texas Tech, that goes a long way in terms of helping you get a better seeding and potentially avoiding a team like, I don't know, James Madison, Indiana State talk. There's been a lot of that in the comment section as well. So it's going to be interesting tomorrow, and we'll know pretty early in the morning if Warren Washington will play, with tip-off in Kansas City, scheduled between 2 top 25 teams and 2 top 5 teams in the Big 12, the 4-5 matchup out in Kansas City. Well, if he'll play or not, we'll see. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, not Kareem, cream, like you put in your coffee, to Lubbock next year, please. Yeah, no, he's fun to watch, man. If you haven't seen the Sycamores play, they're a fun team and a team I want no business with in the NCAA tournament. Nick also says, big news for next year with the Legends Classic non-conference tournament. Yes, Texas Tech will head up to the Barclays Center and play in the Legends Classic the week before Thanksgiving. A pre-Thanksgiving trip, anybody? Up to the Big Apple? It's possible. You can see Texas Tech play St. Joe's, Syracuse, and a team that has tried to get away from the Red Raiders for going on 3 years now, the Texas Longhorns. Those will be the 4 teams in the Legends Classic in 2024 up at Barclays. I'm going to wrap it up there. I really appreciate y'all. We've got 760 people watching right now. Seriously, thank y'all so much for spending some of your Wednesday with me. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, do so. I know y'all are watching. I know everybody watching this right now has not followed me on Twitter. You're a liar if you say otherwise. I'll have updates on Texas Tech men's basketball, whether that's on the court or off of it with the portal. Be sure to head on over to the Scarlet and Black Insiders. First month is $1, and we'll have premier coverage of Texas Tech basketball, covering them all the way through their postseason journey, as well as the portal season. Got some pretty good talent over there. You're going to want to go check it out. And then also hit that subscribe button on YouTube. I left the link down below on Twitter for daily Texas Tech videos, whether that's football, men's basketball, we're talking recruiting, portal talk, whatever it may be. We've got you covered right here on the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube. That's not a joke. The only other Texas Tech YouTube page bigger than the Back to 12 podcast is literally the Texas Tech University Athletics one. Okay? It's the most engaging one here too, right here on the Back to 12 podcast. So join the most engaging group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube today by hitting that subscribe button. I'll catch you next time here on the Back to 12 podcast channel.